Hi, I'm Kinsey, and this is my April wrap-up. So this month was a very productive reading month for me, probably because I couldn't leave my apartment. So I read 15 books. I took part in the Magical Readathon, the OWL's Magical Readathon, and I decided to just try to do all of them, do all of the prompts, not like select a couple for my career path and all that, so that I have more options when it comes to the second part of the readathon later this year. So I read 12 books for that, and then I read 3 other books, 2 of which were on audio, and 1 of which I started in March and finished in April. So I'll start with the non-magical readathon books. So I read most of this book in March, but I finished it in April, and that is The Gifted School by Bruce Holsinger. This is definitely on the longer side. I don't read a lot of long books. It's like 450-ish pages. It's I enjoyed it. It's set in Colorado, among these like pretty like affluent suburb. A new magnet public school is opening, and all of these parents are trying to get their kids in. So it's kind of just like messy suburban friendships, parents, all of that. I enjoyed it. It was light. It was fun. Definitely like a distraction from like things that are going on, because all of their problems are like not actually as big as they feel like they are. So I enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So of the 2 audiobooks that I read, the first of which was Atomic Habits by James Clear. So I've read my fair share of self-help types of books and like habit building types of books. I read The Power of Habit last year, and I enjoyed that. So I thought I would check out some more habit building books, because that's something I'm into nowadays, I guess. Trying to have some semblance of like routine in normal life. So I enjoyed Atomic Habits. I probably should have read the physical book instead of listening to it, because I might have been able to take more away from it. But it's all about like building those habits from small pieces, like just dedicating like what can you do in a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes to get you further along in that habit. And there were a couple other approaches to habits that I enjoyed in that. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I would probably reconsider like looking at the physical book and seeing if I could take away concrete like notes from it, because I think reading it or listening to it via audiobook, I don't know if it stuck with me as much as it could have, but it was good. The next audiobook that I listened to was Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein. He, I think, is one of the co-founders of Vox, and he's obviously like politics, journalism, all of that stuff. It's all about why politics has become so polarized in the US, using a lot of studies about like how polarizing politics was back in like the 70s, 80s, and then like kind of how that switch happened, and just like that whole like arc of like how we've become more partisan like in the US period. So that was very interesting. I learned a lot. Made me a little bit concerned about the future, not gonna lie. And the current state of the world doesn't help that. But I found it very interesting and informative. So if you're into nonfiction and you want to understand how we got to where we are in terms of partisanship and Trump and everything, then I'd suggest reading it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I think I decided a few days into April that I was going to do the Magical Readathon, the OWL portion of the Magical Readathon. And I know that you could just pick a couple OWLs for a specific career, but I didn't want to like limit myself. I'm just like, I'm going to try to do all 12 of the subjects, all 12 of the prompts. And obviously none of those books could count for more than 1 prompt. So, and I decided this like a couple days into the month, so I didn't even start it on the first day. So great planning, awesome. But I did it. Had to definitely pick some shorter books to get through it. I also did the reading rush, and so I'm going to go through those books. the books for the reading rush I picked out of my books for the Magical Readathon, so there was like those fully overlapped. But let me go through those books. This first one, Women in Power by Mary Beard. I picked this one for Potions, which was a book under 150 pages. So I've had this one for a little bit. It got recommended a couple times, I think, on BookTube. It's 2 different lectures, I think, that she did. She's a famous classics person. I don't know if it's a classicist. I don't know. But she has a lot of knowledge of classics, Greek, Roman, all of that. And so these are 2 different lectures that were turned into essays all about women in power, women's voice in the public, all of that stuff. I enjoyed it. It was short. It was quick. It was good. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So next, for the Care of Magical Creatures subject, which the prompt was reading a book with an animal that has a beak on the cover. So I picked a book with a bird on the cover, and that is Real Life by Brandon Taylor. This was being hyped up to me a fair amount between Instagram, and I've seen some reviews for it. It's about a Black grad student in biochemistry at a Midwestern university. I think it's kind of presumed to be like University of Madison, Wisconsin, or University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'd actually been there before, so when he was describing like the layout of the town, like I'm pretty sure since he went there that that's what it's supposed to be, but he didn't, I don't think he actually named the name. But so it takes place over the course of a weekend, like from a Friday to a Sunday, I think. And he's struggling, he's struggling in his life, finding purpose, trying to figure out like what to do, and things, like bad things keep happening to him. He keeps getting in like weird arguments or disagreements with his friends, all of that. I don't know if I enjoyed the writing style as much as I thought I would, based on all the reviews I was seeing. It might just not be for me. I really wanted to like this book a lot more than I did. There was like one metaphor or simile that really kind of bothered me, of like the mismatched mugs were like foster children, like not fitting in, and I was like, I don't know if that's like doing what it's supposed to do for me. So there were a couple little things like that. Overall, like, it's kind of just rough, he's going through it right now, and maybe it's just like the timing of when I read this, but I wasn't the biggest fan. I only gave it 3 stars, might be closer to like 2.5. I wanted to like it so much more than I did, and I thought I would connect to it more than I did. So the next book I read was for the herbology course, and it was a title that starts with M, and as everyone has been reading on BookTube, I read Memory Police. I enjoyed it. It was good. I don't think it was quite what I thought it was going to be. And I was listening to Ariel Bassett's podcast, I think, and she mentioned also that, like, just, like, the marketing, like, the cover and, like, the comparison to 1984 and all of that, I think it sets you up with the expectation for it to be a lot more gritty than it is. It's definitely, like, just dreamy, and, like, it's all about this island where things disappear, and they don't disappear as in they literally disappear overnight. Like, everyone just, as a entire society, like, forgets the thing, and then they have, like, a kind of ritualistic, like, they burn everything. Like, they burn all of their objects. So if soap was disappeared, they would all, like, burn or put in the river or whatever their soap, and they would forget it even existed. Or, like, ribbons, if they disappeared, they would do the same for that. And everyone just wakes up knowing what disappeared overnight. So the main character, she is, like, a normal person, in that, like culture in that society, but like there are people who do remember disappeared items, and there's this police force called the Memory Police who like investigates and finds those people who keep remembering things. So it definitely was not as like dark and gritty, and like it's interesting to pick as a character not the people who are like the exception, but the people who are the majority. I don't know how much of this is a spoiler, like I'm not spoiling the events of it, but it is, and I mean it's pretty clear from the beginning, like the main character's role in all of this. But it was definitely like interesting, and I enjoyed it. Yeah, I gave this 4 stars. I liked it. Definitely, I wish that the expectations had been set a little bit differently based on like the marketing and like the push behind it. But I understand why they did it, because like, I don't know, comparisons to 1984, people are going to want to pick it up. I just don't think that was the most apt description. But I still liked it for what it is. Very dreamy, very hazy, very weird mood. But I liked it. So the next book I read was for the arithmetic course, and that was to read something outside of my favorite genre. So originally I was going to pick a longer book, but I was concerned about getting through all these books, so I ended up choosing a book of poetry because I don't read a lot of poetry on my day-to-day. So I picked Flesh, I think that's how it's pronounced, by Mary Jean Chan. This was great. I should probably just read more poetry than I do, but it's a lot about the main character and her relationship to her mom, and race and queerness or gayness and love. I think at the beginning this says it's a book of love poetry, love poems. So I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of references to fencing, so if you know a lot about fencing, I don't, but my partner does, so she really liked it. But yeah, so I enjoyed this a lot. It was originally recommended, I think, by Jen Campbell on her BookTube channel, so I really appreciate that recommendation because this was great. I'm going to look out for more things by her. 5 out of 5 stars in case that wasn't obvious. So the next subject that I read for was Charms, and that was to read a book with a white cover. So I think I went above and beyond because I read The White Book. So I think I should get extra credit for that. I don't know if that's possible. But this is by Han Kang, who also wrote The Vegetarian, which I loved. Very dark and weird and surreal. This is, I think, technically poetry or poetic to some extent. The writer-narrator is in this writing retreat in Warsaw, and she's writing about that, and she's also reflecting on her, her older sister who died as an infant, so her mom had a baby who died almost immediately after birth. So it's all about that. It's all about the color white, so what different white objects kind of set the tone for the beginning of the book, like snowflakes and ice and cloud and like newborn gown and all of these things. So I found it really interesting. I enjoyed it. It was a 4 out of 5 stars. Kind of on like maybe the experimental or poetry side, so if you're not into that, you might not be into it, but I liked it. So 4 out of 5 stars. So the next 3 books I read were actually for the Reading Rush, stay-at-home Reading Rush, as well as for the Magical Readathon. So I made these books count for both. So the first one that I read was for astronomy, and that was to read most of the book while it's dark outside. And the Reading Rush prompt that I used it for was to read a book with a house on the cover. And so I chose Opioid, Indiana by Brian Allen Carr. The houses are mobile homes. I like this a lot. I was kind of surprised at how much I liked it. Yeah, so it's about, the main character is a 17-year-old boy who is an orphan. He lives, it's like set in present day in Indiana, and he's been passed around ever since his parents died to different guardians, and he's at his uncle's right now, and his uncle goes missing. His uncle's on drugs, as opioid might hints at. And his uncle's girlfriend is like really worried about him, and he's like, I mean, the main character, he's trying to figure out his own life. Like he gets suspended from school for a week, and so this is following 1 week where they're trying to find the uncle. He's trying to sort himself, the main character's trying to sort himself out, and a lot of commentary on like present day issues, Trump stuff, racism stuff, opioid crisis stuff, like all of that. But it was kind of like a very quick paced, and I mean I don't know, there's like these drawings throughout. There's this like story that he tells about like how the days of the week were named that he and his mom came up with. So I actually like really liked it. I feel like it stuck with me like really well. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Very interesting, kind of dark, well, pretty dark. Yeah, but it kind of surprised me. Then the next book that I read for the stay-at-home reading rush fulfilled the book that will make me smile. I was taking kind of a bet on this one. It also fulfilled the subject of ancient runes by having a heart on the cover, and that is Useless Magic by Florence Welch. I love Florence and the Machine. This is basically majority lyrics with like collage and notes to herself or notes period. Only at the end is there like original poetry. Its vast majority is lyrics, which is, I think, good to know if you didn't know that, if you're considering getting it. I enjoyed it. I don't think I was as blown away. I definitely smiled at parts, but it's kind of funny because I feel like her music is more upbeat and the lyrics are still dark. And so just reading the lyrics without the music can be a little bit like they're a little darker than you think they're going to be almost. But I ended up only giving it 3 stars, probably just because it didn't stick with me very much. It's a beautiful book, it's pretty, but I don't think I got a ton from it. I wish it had been more of her original poetry, because I really enjoyed that at the end when it was original poetry, not lyrics. So 3 out of 5 stars. And then the last book for the stay-at-home reading rush, the prompt was read a book set somewhere you want to go, and also I think it fulfilled the prompt of reading it in one room. So this was a pretty quick book, so I was able to just read it in one room. And for the Magical Readathon, it fulfilled the book set at a sea or coast, and so that is The Summer Book by Tove Jansson, who came up with like the Moonim, like the cartoon thing. So I like this a lot. It's about a 6-year-old granddaughter and her grandmother on this very remote island in Finland. I mostly picked it because I wanted to go travel somewhere new, like somewhere maybe in Europe or something, and clearly that's not gonna happen anytime soon. So I just wanted to like get out of the house and get on the coast, which is why I picked this. It was also short. I liked it. Definitely nature writing focused, I guess. Like a lot of description about the island itself and all of this stuff. It's basically like a series of stories about this family, like not necessarily like an overarching like plot, like just different events that happen to them. I ended up only giving it 3 stars, but I still enjoyed it. It was interesting. I'd never really known much about that like part of Finland that's like super northern with like the islands like getting more remote as you go farther north. So but I liked it. 3 stars. And then the next book I read, the next subject I read it for was divination, and so that was to pick a random book from my TBR list. So I have a bookshelf on Goodreads called Unread Physical, and I ended up doing a Google random number generator and putting those like in order, which I think is mostly by like when I added them. But the random number was 33, and the 33rd book was The Pisces, which I've had on my like shelf for like maybe a year or so. I got this early when it came out, because the cover was really pretty and I thought I would like it. This is a funny one. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It's definitely weird. I saw a review after I finished it that was saying it's basically like mermaid human porn, which is a little bit rough. Like it's there's definitely like erotic parts to it, so I would not recommend it for the faint of heart. But the main character is a librarian, and she's getting a, I think, PhD or something, and so she's studying Sappho, or like that's what her thesis is on, but she's been taking a long time with that. Her boyfriend of like many years broke up with her suddenly. She decides to go to Venice Beach in California, where her sister lives, while her sister is traveling. Her sister's like pretty wealthy, and so she's there to dog sit her sister's dog, and to like get over this breakup. And so she is in this like group for basically like women recovering from breakups, but also from like, because she kind of goes on like a downward spiral after the breakup. But it's also funny, whatever. And then she meets this magical man in the rocks in the water, and he's a merman. So I don't think that's a spoiler because it says it like elsewhere. An eerily attractive swimmer. It's funny. It's like dark funny, and I saw some review that was like it's too dark, like it's not taking mental illness seriously enough. But like I think it is taking it seriously. It's just like such a ridiculous situation that is happening and that's unfolding. It ends up being a lot more deep than you think it's gonna be. It's pretty short. I liked it. It was weird, but would recommend for like the right person if that sounds like something you'd be interested in. It says on the cover it's explosive, erotic, and scathingly funny. I think that's very accurate. So if you're not down with that, would not recommend it. If you are, go for it. I liked it. So the next book I read was actually for the history of magic subject, and that book was supposed to be about witches. And so I had a hard time figuring out what I wanted to pick for this. I eventually decided to pick this one after reading some reviews that said it had witchcraft, or at least witchcraft elements in it. So I read Bunny by Mona Awad. This is about a MFA student at a elite university, and she kind of like scoffs at the other women in her program who are all very preppy and wealthy, and they call each other Bunny, and they're very like cliquish, and they are actually kind of cultish. So needless to say, she gets involved in their weird cult thing, and it spirals from there. I've heard this compared to like Mean Girls meets The Craft, compared to The Heathers. It's weird, it's dark. I think I liked it. I gave it 4 stars. It's definitely weird. I don't want to spoil anything. I liked it a lot. I read it because several BookTube people, Kayla from Books and Lala, loves this book. I just saw that Gabby from I think Gabby Reads just read it too. I liked it. Definitely weird. I think it still counts for witchcraft, even though there weren't really explicit mentions of craft things necessarily, but it was definitely like witchy or magical. So I'm counting it, and you can't stop me. 4 out of 5 stars. So the next book I read was for Transfiguration, and that was a book with shape-shifting in it. Again, I mostly read fiction, like literary, like contemporary fiction, and some nonfiction. Like I do not read a lot of like books that have shape-shifting in it. So actually it was handy that this had been mentioned by a couple different booktubers, I think. Paul takes the form of a mortal girl. The main character, Paul, is a shapeshifter. He can't change into any shape, but he can like modify his appearance pretty well. But basically this is more of like a exploration of queer culture and scene and identity in the early / mid 90s. So Paul like is in Iowa in school, and then he goes to Michigan and he gets involved with a woman there, and then he moves, and like as he is transformed into Polly, who is like a woman, and then he goes to Provincetown, and then he goes to like San Francisco. So it's all about like queer culture in the 90s. I was not live when this was set, so I don't get many of the references. There's a lot of music references. There's a lot of like kind of in jokes that are in there. I get some of them, but only like because I've heard them referenced before as references, not because I lived through it. So I still liked it. Definitely was a lot about like identity, self-exploration, bodies, labels, all of that. I think I ended up giving it a 4 stars. It's probably closer to a 3.5 for me. I don't think I'm the best audience for this. I think a queer person who's older would probably resonate better with them. But it was still good. I liked it. There's not a lot of shape shifting in like literary fiction circles, so definitely was interesting. And then the last book I read this month was maybe the most disappointing book this month. So it was for Muggle Studies, which was just to read a contemporary novel. At first I was going to read Fleischman is in Trouble, but that is like long and I was under a time limit. So I picked a shorter book, Speak No Evil, by Uzodimna Iweala. Sorry for pronunciation. I was not a fan. I thought I was going to like this. The main character, Niru, is coming to the realization that he's gay. He goes to a private school in DC, and his parents are Nigerian, and he knows that they would not, like, they're religious also, and so he knows it wouldn't be okay, basically, to come out. So, but then he does come out at the very beginning, and things kind of spiral from there. He comes out to his friend Meredith at the beginning. It was just very dark and upsetting. And I know it's because there are dark and upsetting things that happen to people, but I don't think it needed to be this way, like this dark or this upsetting. I don't think any one work needs as much like unhappiness and almost not like a single moment. Like it felt ominous to me the whole time. And even after bad things happened, it kept feeling ominous. And maybe it's just like not the right time to be reading like this bummer of a book. And for it being so short, it was a real bummer. Like it bummed me out. I keep saying that, but it was a bummer. So I think I only gave it like 2 stars. I wanted this to be different than it was, and maybe that's on me for expectations, but I didn't expect it to be as dark and upsetting as it was. So kind of ended the month of reading on a low note, I would say. But like there were a couple of just writing style things that I wasn't a fan of. Like the dialogue is not distinguished by quotation marks, and they're very long paragraphs, so sometimes it was hard to tell who was saying what, and I know maybe that was the intention, but I wasn't the biggest fan of that. I've liked that style in other places, like Sally Rooney's Normal People has that, but at least it's still separated out, so it's very clear who's talking, but this felt like very... I got lost sometimes, so it wasn't my favorite, but you win some, you lose some. So those were the 15 books that I read this month. I don't think I've read this many books a month since I was a child. I read a lot and I'm excited and I want to keep reading a lot. The interesting thing is it's gone definitely from like reading a lot of audiobooks to reading a lot more physical books as the stay at home situation has continued. So I have kind of an ambitious TBR for next month. I will be posting that soon. It involves multiple readathons, so I'm excited. I think readathons have been helpful since all of this started to feel a little bit more of like a community connection and all of that. So I'm excited. So that was a great reading month. A bunch of really good books or interesting books or whatever. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought, or if you have recommendations based off of reading these books. I would love to hear what you guys think. All right, thanks. Bye.